it's taken me a few days to really just process in my head that My Hero Academia is truly over. And when I saw this page, I saw Izuku a lot older, a lot more mature, 8-year time skip, walking towards UA to be a sensei slash teacher there. It left me with feelings of happiness, bittersweetness, and loneliness. Because the chapter tried to convey those emotions perfectly. That life goes on, life will go on with or without you, and even in the brightest of times, sometimes there can be sadness, bittersweet times as well. And I love everything about what this chapter represents. The conclusion of My Hero Academia. It's had a lot of ups, it's had a lot of downs, a lot of midpoints. But overall, it is a series that will stick with me in my heart until my last breath I take, until the day I die. It is something that fundamentally has affected me and millions, hundreds of millions of people on this planet. And you could say whatever you want about My Hero Academia being an absolute garbage series or whatever. It has had an effect on people, positively. And some negatively, but mostly positively, I would assume. And it's sad that a series, after so long, after 10 years, a 10-year-long journey, it is truly over. This is the end. And this chapter potentially hints that there could be a sequel, but at this point, it's pretty much more or less over. That the journey of Deku, our main male character, has reached its conclusion, just as how the beginning of the story set up, where, you know, Deku wanted to be a hero, he was wondering if he could be a hero. The chapter ends on where he's like giving encouragement to a kid that wonders the exact same thing that Deku wondered in chapter 1. It's a very beautiful message showcasing the passage of time, coming of age, but also Deku passing on his will, his ideals to the next generation. And that just as though Deku now needs to step out of the spotlight because he no longer has one for all, he's passing on that will to the next generation, just as how All Might did to Deku. It's beautiful. I love the messaging here. I love the symbolic nature of it. I love how it comes full circle with all the themes that My Hero Academia has bubbled to the surface with, about heroes versus villains, wanting to be a hero, you know, what it means to be a hero, wanting to save people, trying to make a society that, you know, heroes have more free time because society is better and less villains. All these different type of themes. It's truly beautiful, and I love everything that Horikoshi did with this final chapter. Was it a perfect finale? No, but was it the finale that I think fits My Hero Academia the best, especially with what has been written? I do think so. I don't think that there was really any better way to use this final chapter. The only thing that would come to mind if, you know, we had to add anything, is that if the chapter was 40 to 60 pages long. But thanks to it not really having an extended final chapter, with what Horikoshi had to work with these pages, it was a very fitting conclusion that left me, like I said, in a state of happiness, loneliness, and bittersweet. And I think that's perfect. It's a perfect way. Now, I know that a conclusion of a series, any series, not just a manga, but live action, anime, etc., it's not going to satisfy everybody. There's going to be a lot of people that walk away from this final chapter, 430, and are left with probably anger, and they're just upset, and they feel like this is an absolutely dog water conclusion. There's going to be people like that, and that's completely fair, because when you have a viewership pool of like millions of people reading a series, there's definitely going to be a handful of people, never just 0%, there's going to be a handful of people that are just not going to like the conclusion, no matter how perfect it potentially is. And I definitely can see a lot of people not liking this conclusion of what it could have been, because I know I've seen complaints already, people saying that Deku, oh wow, his friends forgot about him, wow, Deku's quirkless, wow, he's just a teacher working 9 to 5. I've definitely seen these comments from people for the past few days since the final chapter came out, and I'll get into that in a moment. But for now, just talking about the conclusion and my thoughts on the finale itself, it's good. It is a good finale. When I put it up against other stories I've seen in the last like 4 or 5 years that have had conclusions, I didn't walk away from the story being very upset. I walked away being, this is a good finale. The final page, closing the final page of the story, and that's it. So, there's nothing more I could really ask for, honestly. So, yeah, regardless of what people feel, I enjoyed this conclusion. So with that being said, let's segue into the next part. Let's talk about My Hero Academia as a whole, but also what this chapter really tried to convey to its audience. So I feel like this page here in particular is gaining a lot of traction from people, and the reason for that is because this final chapter, before you get to the last section of it, after this end where All Might comes in and Fourth Wall breaks the ending, which I think that's really cool. I love this segment. I'll talk about this in a second. I want to talk about this segment of the chapter, and that is Izuku feeling lonely. Most of the chapter is narration from Izuku, him talking about just like how life has changed, how society has grown and repaired itself, and we even see at the start of the chapter where everybody is, getting into hero duties, moving on, etc., helping each other, and you see the last sparks of One for All, the embers, so to speak, leave him for good. It's a very sad moment, because any hope or desperation that, One for All potentially could return to, Deku was crushed, destroyed in this chapter. Deku truly became quirkless once again. And you just see the passage of time. You're seeing Ida sitting here giving his speech, most likely his graduation speech that, he's been happy to be in UA for all these years. You see a bunch of characters just going on with their life. You see Endeavor. You see, them at Shirakumo's grave here. Aizawa's at Shirakumo's grave. You see everybody graduating and moving on with their lives. It's very beautiful, but very sad, because endings usually do leave you in a very sad state. And as Izuku continues to narrate, he talks about just like how he doesn't get to talk with his friends much anymore because their life has moved on. They have moved on, etc. And a lot of people will legitimately get upset with that, because it's like, with all everybody's been through, all that Bakugo, Todoroki, Ida, Great Boy, everyone has been through, you would think that they would try to keep in contact with Izuku more. But the chapter basically states that it's not really been easy because they're all so busy. And I want to talk about this from a realistic perspective and just what this means and what Horikoshi was trying to convey to people. Because I feel like a lot of people are looking at this with, this needs to always be happy and, a really good conclusion. Nobody should ever, slowly dissipate away from the friend group. There's something that needs to be said. I feel like people that are going to relate with this ending the most are those that actually have graduated. Because I feel like Horikoshi has realized at this point that a lot of his audience and readership, most likely at this point in time, when this chapter finally did release, most of them are probably adults now, or at the very early stages or late stages in high school, or graduated and moving on to college life. And because of that, a lot of people can relate with this moment of Izuku, no longer communicating with his friend group as much, because life goes on. You have it to where they all get their own lives. They all have their own careers, their own jobs, their own agencies, their own workplace, their own family. They don't have time to continuously interact with every single person they knew in high school. Even though that sounds messed up because of everything they've been through, they're lifelong friends. Life does move on, and things happen to where, like, you don't just talk to those same people every single day, because it was very easy for them to talk with the friend group, the whole class, because they went to the same homeroom, the same school together. They saw each other every single day. But now that, they're no longer seeing each other every single day, they have their own agencies and life to live, they can't properly meet up to talk with each other, because some might have night shifts, some might have day shifts, mid shifts, some might, be busy with taking care of family members. There could be a lot of different things. And so factoring all of that in, it makes a lot of sense why not a lot of them meet up as often as they used to. But it also makes sense why Izuku feels slight loneliness because of it. And I feel like a lot of people are going to really focus in on that, saying that that's really messed up. Izuku has a really horrible life now. That's not the message. The main takeaway is that Izuku has returned to a normal set of life, and that he got to live a dream briefly, and, he's happy with where he is. He's teaching the next generation that they can actually be a hero. It circles around to the main themes and messages that the start of My Hero Academia began with. And it's a very beautiful conclusion for his character. There's not a better way to really conclude Deku's character. Like I said, him feeling sad or lonely that he can't be on the field and stuff is fair. That is completely fair emotion, but anyone would feel a sense of longing or sadness if they wish they could go back to their prime years, and which is one of the reasons why I thought this comment, that's the only comment on me today, was very funny. This is really funny, because even if I don't fully agree with this, it's like, for a fact that probably deep down, most likely Izuku is looking at recordings of himself back in high school days. People will do that. But getting back on topic, though, I think that the messages and themes perfect. I think that, you know, people saying Izuku being a teacher working a 9 to 5 is a little bit upsetting. There's nothing wrong with that. Heroes can be in many shapes and forms. Police workers, firefighters, teachers, actual heroes, they can come in many shapes. And in this way, Izuku might not be physically fighting a villain, but he's being a hero to this kid that wishes he could be a hero. And Izuku, in his own way, gives him courage and lets him know, yes, you can be. And so in this moment, he was a hero for this boy. And I think that is also a very fitting message to convey to the audience, that heroes and heroism come in also many shapes and forms as well. So let's talk about the actual final segment of the chapter. We get to see Old Might, which, holy crap, this man's still kicking 8 years later is ridiculous at this point. We get to see the final page, a group shot of all the characters and just like how much they've aged. And oh my goodness, I could go on about this for a very long time, but a lot of these designs are just straight up fire. Some haven't changed too much, like Bakugo overall, I don't think he's changed that dramatically. But I think that overall the designs are pretty cool. I love seeing a little bit more of a mature design to the characters. I absolutely love our alien queen up here. I'm a big fan of the design. We get to see Shinzo up here. I mean, yes, you see Izuku, talk about that in a second. Ochiko's design at first glance doesn't look like it's changed much, but then you notice the thickness and you're like, holy crap. And, you know, I want to point this out, this post that, you know, Pride made here. I don't think this is actually what's happening in the panel, but, yeah, I could definitely see why people would think that. But, I guess that is a good segue to talk about. So, despite everything about this chapter being pretty much next to perfection, at least for me, there was something that was not talked about. And I feel like this is a good and a bad thing, depending on how you view it. But Horikoshi didn't even address the relationships at all in this final chapter. He left everything very vague, and not really giving any 100% concrete confirmation to if characters ended up with who. For instance, like, there's a brief moment in the chapter where you get to see the agencies and stuff, like right here. You can clearly see this agency is obviously Kaminari and Jiro side by side. And even though it's not confirmed anything with their dialogue or whatever, you could assume maybe they have feelings for each other and they work together a lot, so they probably are in a relationship, but it's never directly stated. It's more of these little hints or Easter eggs that Horikoshi is implying throughout the chapter, and it's never downright confirmed. And that the same can be said for the, Ochiko and, you know, Izuku relationship. It's never fully officially confirmed, even though it's been an 8-year time skip, but there is something to point out that people have definitely been pointing out a lot, and that is Ochiko has Izuku's guard from his outfit on her neck now, if you look closely. And it's very clear she's taken his hero costume to a degree and he uses it, while Izuku uses the scarf around his neck from, you know, Gran Torino. And I think that is showcasing the connection between Ochiko and Izuku, so they're potentially going out, but like I said, it's not confirmed. So I feel like overall, there is some disappointment there that Horikoshi left it very vague, but maybe at the end of the day, it's for the best, because I feel like Horikoshi being on the internet for a very long time, definitely having an active official social media account on Twitter of all places, he's definitely seen the toxicity of his fan base, at least a portion of his fan base, and I feel like maybe he knew deep down if he confirmed anything, he would get just sent so much hate mail and, you know, mail telling him basically to end it all, like, you know, like death threats and stuff. You know there would be people to do that, regardless of whatever relationship with whoever got with. So I feel like him leaving it vague, even if people might call him a coward for it, I think that it's probably maybe for the best. Unless he wants to do a follow-up, then he'll probably confirm it. But overall, that is definitely a point of conversation I know people are going to have about this chapter, is that there really was no confirmation about the relationship. So, looks like that toxic side of My Hero Academia isn't fully going to go away. So, yeah. Anyways, let's talk about Izuku for a second and why he's on the front line. So let's segue into that. So All Might walks up to Izuku and is like, I wanted to deliver you this briefcase. There's been a lot of study, a lot of science, a lot of funding put into this. Bakugo and all the Class A has worked together to fund this operation to be able to give this to you. And this is a continuation of what I talked about earlier on in this video. Everybody doing their own thing and moving on with their lives. Even though they have done that, they haven't forgotten about Deku and Izuku, their friend, and all the money on the side that they've been making, they've been pouring it into being able to make this new hero gear for Izuku to be able to participate on the front lines and actually be a field hero even without a quirk. It's a very inspirational moment because it basically showcases even if you are powerless and don't have a quirk, you could still be a hero on the front lines. It's a really fitting message that Izuku gets to go back to living his dream once again, and I like this little showcasing, showing that, yeah, his friends haven't fully forgotten about him, so this shuts down that conversation of people saying that, wow, they don't like Izuku anymore, they don't care about him. They clearly do with this dialogue here. But it's a very beautiful moment, made a lot of sense, with All Might being able to use Iron Might, so to speak, that experimental tech to be able to fight All for One briefly, arguably one of the strongest villains of all time, yeah, Izuku being able to have some form of gear 8 years later, it's perfectly fine. It doesn't feel like an ass pull or anything. It truly feels in line with what the story is. So, him being on the front lines again is pretty beautiful. I like that. It's cute. And, yeah, overall, couldn't ask for any more with that. So that is the official conclusion. So let's get into My Hero Academia as a whole. The current state of My Hero Academia and what it means going forward for the community as well. So I would like to talk about the journey to get to this point. My Hero Academia has had an everlasting impact on a lot of people, including myself. And I have definitely talked about in recent times my problems with My Hero Academia. And now that I know this is the official conclusion, I could finally get my thoughts out there on just everything that's happened with the final arc, but also My Hero Academia as a whole. Beginning of My Hero Academia, all the way up until All for One versus All Might was peak. It was honestly one of the highest highs of the entire manga. And then it got even higher with My Villain Academia. And then afterwards, it got even higher with Shigaraki potentially becoming the successor of All for One, but keeping his agency, his own mind. Then it slowly started to spiral with the introduction of Star and Stripe, and I've said my piece on that, how I felt about the whole events of that. Even despite Horikoshi trying to add in that Star and Stripe was still useful to a degree with the last chapters of the fight with Shigaraki and Izuku, I still feel like there was definitely a lot better he could have done with the character. And on top of that, the final war arc, overall, it's decent. It has a lot of good moments, and especially watching it through the anime, there's some good moments there. But there's a lot of bad that needs to be talked about. And the first one that really just comes to mind is the lack of threat. There didn't feel like there was really any threat in the final arc, and I feel like this is something that really needs to be addressed. The previous war arc, before the final arc, Shigaraki was released, he wasn't fully complete, and he pretty much puts a hole through Gran Torino. And a lot of people complained about that. I was a little bit lenient on that in my chapter reviews at that time, because I figured maybe, it would change with the final arc or something. But it was more of a warning sign of what Horikoshi would do going forward. He didn't want to kill off characters. When Gran Torino lived, which after he took that hold, he was in the hospital, there was really no reason for Gran Torino to be around anymore. Like, he really served no more purpose even in the story. The only purpose was his scarf being around, Deku's neck. I feel like his purpose just straight up died, and he should have died there to showcase the threat of Shigaraki getting rid of the old generation. But Horikoshi didn't kill off Gran Torino. And in fact, nobody of significant importance really died besides Midnight, and even then, she was completely off-screen. And there could be, conversations of why, because she was surrounded by a bunch of male villains, so you could speculate what potentially happened to her if it was a seinen manga. But overall, Horikoshi didn't really kill any characters off, really. And after that point, and you got to the Star and Stripe, he did kill off characters, but he killed off a character that really shouldn't have died, that died in under 5 chapters, when she had a lot of potential to be a mentor and teacher to Izuku and Class A, but we never saw that. And it left a lot, including myself, very disappointed. Especially after just, everything the previous arc set up, to the stuff also previously before that with My Villain Academia, to Little Brava and Gentle as well. There was a lot of great moments. And I really, if you want to say the moment I feel like My Hero Academia peaked, was either the Gentle and La Brava stuff, or the My Villain Academia stuff. Those two segments of the story is literally the peak of the manga, for me. It was the best time period of the entire manga because of the themes, the messages, and what Horikoshi was playing with. It was very interesting themes that he was constantly playing with in those segments of the story, and I feel like he had to course correct and change a lot of things because of what the audience in Japan was thinking about at that time. talk about that more in a second. But getting into the main point, the series started to really spiral out of control after Star and Stripe, where Horikoshi put the characters in a very dangerous situation against All For One and Shigaraki, and, you know, Bakugo should have died. His heart pretty much exploded. And he survived, and the characters that tried to help him, like Best Jeanist and Edgeshot, even though Edgeshot should have died as well, Edgeshot also survived. And he really was a character with pretty much no character development whatsoever. He was just there, and he survived as well. And I feel like the agency of the arc in terms of, like, the threat just was non-existent. Once Bakugo survived and people were just surviving left and right blows from Shigaraki and nobody actually died, I felt like overall my thoughts and feelings of anyone truly important dying was non-existent. And I felt like that was fundamentally a big issue with the final arc of My Hero Academia. Hands down one of the worst things. On top of that, Bakugo living, I understand he's gotten a lot of character development, especially at the end here, and I do like his interaction with Izuku, but he still should have died, man. Don't put him in a situation like that just to bring him back. It really ruined the overall menace that Shigaraki was. On top of that, All Might. His situation fighting All For One. I understand he was using Iron Might to fight. He still shouldn't have survived. He should have died there. And the fact he was kept around even after that, also, I wasn't a big fan of. It was a cool fight, don't get me wrong, but he should have died. Then, on top of that as well, there was a lot of little characters here and there, character moments, that, you know, characters should have died too, like Sun Eater, etc., against Shigaraki, but that didn't happen. But pushing aside that, there's more problems than just deaths. You also have the agency of Shigaraki. And what I mean by this is that Shigaraki's character reached a peak when he fought Redestro and founded the Liberation Front, so to speak. The Paranormal Liberation Front. It was a very big moment for his character, him becoming the new All For One, so to speak, getting in power in his own way, and wanting to create a free world. It was a very powerful message. Despite him wanting to cause complete destruction, he was going to basically create as well. It was beautiful. I really loved his character a lot for it, and I think a lot of people fell in love with Shigaraki's character after that. But then, the surgery happened, and All For One's quirk started to try to take over his body, which is fine at the time, because it looked like Shigaraki fought back and he was winning. But then we, you know, go into the next arc, and it's clear that Shigaraki that was actually there is pretty much non-existent. He's merged into a new being of All For One. And I feel like Shigaraki as a character was really squandered and wasted, because I felt like it would have been more thematic and interesting if he didn't have All For One really just controlling most of his actions for the final arc. I feel like that was very annoying. I didn't like that, and I felt like it took away a lot from Shigaraki's character in its entirety from what was set up at that point. Because the end result, even at the end of the day, Shigaraki needed to go. He needed to die because of what his objective was. I feel like Horikoshi could have handled Shigaraki's character a lot better, but he ridded his personality, got it away pretty much just to kind of throw All For One in the seat. Which gets into the main issue of why I think this happened. And I think it all comes down to the experiments that Horikoshi was making around the time of Gentle La Brava and My Villain Academia. FYI, as a reminder, I made a video on this a long time ago, and I feel like this was the reason why the My Villain Academia and the anime did so poorly, is that Japan did not like that arc. They did not like an arc focusing on the villains. They absolutely hated it. And the reason for it is because apparently the Japanese readers just do not like villains as the main character. They don't want to follow the main villains. They wanted to get back to, you know, Deku, etc. They didn't care about the My Villain story, and the ratings of My Hero's manga plummeted at that time period in Japan because of My Villain Academia. And even Horikoshi's editor pretty much was telling him, you shouldn't do this. You shouldn't make an arc like this, but Horikoshi didn't listen and did it anyways. And obviously, seeing the reception from the fans and what the community wanted, it probably hurt Horikoshi's feelings that he couldn't fully write what he wanted, and I feel like after that point is when My Hero Academia really started to have flaws creeping up. You could call it editor meddling, you could call it maybe Horikoshi having problems, health issues, whatever, but I feel like it was a mixture of a lot of things, and I feel like thanks to that is probably why we started fundamentally seeing a shift away from following Shigaraki as a character, and that his personality slowly started to change because of the readers in Japan not really liking Shigaraki, from my assumption. So it's pretty sad overall. I think that is a fundamental big issue. I also think that Redestro should have been used a lot more. in the final arc. I feel like he was completely wasted as a character, especially with the build-up we had in the My Villain Academia arc, but that stems into the same thing I just talked about. I feel like the reason why Horikoshi separated himself and distanced away from Redestro is because it was connected to My Villain Academia. On top of that, I've talked about this past, but Toga's character, I feel like Toga could have definitely been handled a lot better. Yes, her conclusion was great with Ochiko, but I feel like there was a middle segment of her character development just completely cut and skipped over because Horikoshi was rushing to the final arc. Dabi, as a character, you know, I feel like his character intrigue and interest for me died when he revealed that he was Endeavor's son, because he is more or less, I have daddy issues, and you never searched for me, Endeavor, when in reality, Endeavor did search for him, and Endeavor saw his teeth and all that, and basically thought he was actually dead. So Dabi's overall interaction with Endeavor was a little bit cringe. I didn't care too much for Dabi's interaction with Endeavor, even though the conclusion of his character was good a few chapters ago. I just feel like Dabi's character overall felt very flat in comparison to what he could have been. Mr. Compress, he not really a character, really. I mean, with his introduction and his character reveal alongside of Dabi when he revealed to the world what Endeavor did to the family, Mr. Compress kind of fell off as a character. He really didn't have any great character moments or anything, and it felt very wasted. I feel like Horikoshi forgot about Mr. Compress and the reveal that happened, so yeah, that's my fault on that. I feel like Mr. Compress was just truly squandered as a character, especially when he honestly had some of the best moments in the manga on the villain side of the story because of, like, what he did to Overhaul. And it's just like, it's crazy that Overhaul got a better conclusion than Mr. Compress, which was technically a significant villain, a part of Shigaraki's group. So that's strange to me. But besides that, Spinner was handled okay. Could have been better, but Spinner was fine. But yeah, that's the villain side of things. Now, in terms of the hero stuff, like talking about actually what the heroes went through, I mean, there's a lot of heroes that I feel could have gotten developed a lot more focused on. And I don't know. I don't know if it's because Horikoshi didn't care about the characters, he just wanted to be done with it or whatever, which I think this is a perfect segue to actually talk about a lot of characters not getting spotlight. In fact, let's talk about Endeavor. Endeavor got a lot of spotlight. Arguably, I say he got more spotlight than Deku did himself. I wish someone pieced together the chapter count of how many chapters focused on Endeavor in comparison to Deku, because I know the number probably would be shocking. And that is something I want to talk about. Looking back on the entirety, the whole of My Hero Academia, I feel like a lot of time was spent with Endeavor that really shouldn't have been, and don't get my words wrong here. Endeavor's probably my favorite character of the entire manga of My Hero Academia. Anytime there's a chapter dedicated to him, I fell in love with his character even more. He was flawed, he was imperfect, and I love flawed characters. He is an awesome character to follow because of his imperfections, and it made him a lot more enjoyable than Deku, that, yes, he had some flaws, but he was definitely more narrow and goody-goody two-shoes in comparison to Endeavor. So it made Endeavor more enjoyable and just fun to follow. But looking back at everything and a lot of characters that lack spotlight and development, etc., I feel like a lot of those Endeavor chapters took away from the development of other said characters, and I feel like it's in part due to Horikoshi probably falling in love with Endeavor and love writing him because he probably enjoys flawed characters over goody-goody two-shoe characters. I feel like that became very apparent with him wanting to make a My Villain Academia arc. So I think that in the grand scheme of things, I'm glad Horikoshi got to draw or write what he wanted with Endeavor, but I do think that it took away a lot from the manga and the main character Deku as well, because I know there was a lot of times when the manga was obviously still coming out now at this point, that people didn't even remember that Deku was the MC, because Endeavor was always the front and center guy. So I do think that looking back, Endeavor took too much spotlight, especially when you look at the payoff with Dabi, and that was the main focus, that Dabi was just more or less having daddy issues, like he didn't search for me daddy and all that, and I know I'm kind of simplifying it a lot, but it pretty much kind of boils down to that with the whole Dabi situation, and I think that in the grand scheme of things, there was just too much time focused there when it could have focused on other characters, like Mr. Compress maybe, to just any character like Sugarman, etc. Yeah, that's my 2 cents. But, despite that, it's been fun. It's been very fun reading and watching My Hero Academia over the years. It's sad to finally say it's over. It's really over. No more content. It's done. And that's crazy. It's been 10 years. But I guess all good things must come to an end. I love you guys. Thank you so much for watching my content, especially My Hero Academia content these last 10 years. I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much. Be safe, and I love you guys. Chibi out.